Okay, we are going to look at how to actually decide which graph matches each function. This is x dot 2, the first of our IXL assignments for this week. So we talked about in the other video that we will start by looking for an asymptote. This doesn't have a number here. That means that the dashed line needs to go through 0. So we're going to look at each of these. And they all go through 0. Then we're going to come to the front and see whether it's positive or negative. If it is positive like this one, then the graph should be above the asymptote. So we can say that both of these are gone because you can see this graph is below the dashed line. So we are looking at this one or this one. Now we're going to talk about what people find the hardest, which is determining whether it is a growth or decay, and knowing which one that is. So let's look at this real fast. A growth is going to have a b value that is greater than 1. So that means that if the number inside of here is bigger than 1, it's going to end going away from the asymptote. So it may look like either of these. This is if it's positive, and this is if it's negative. If b is a fraction, then that means the number inside of here is a fraction. We're going to end up with a decay where it's going to be going towards the asymptote. So it is going to look like one of these. This is if it's negative, and this is if it's positive. So remember, what we are looking for is we are trying to see if this is a fraction, it will look like this. So as it gets bigger, this is going to go towards it. It ends going towards it or towards the little dash line. If it goes away and it goes away, then that means it's getting bigger. So let's go back to our IXL. And we have a fraction, which means that it's going to end going towards the dotted line. So this one, as I go forward, it goes towards the dotted line. This one, as I go forward, goes away from the dotted line, which means this has to be my answer. Okay, so we are now looking at this graph. First thing we're going to do is look and see if the asymptote is positive 5. So I come down here and that gets rid of both of these. So we're looking at these two now. I see that it is below the dashed line, so I know it's going to start with a negative number, but both of these start with a negative. So I need to see if it's going to be 3 or a fraction, a whole number or a fraction. As I go forward, this goes towards the dashed line. Remember, if I go forward and go towards the dashed line, that means I need a fraction. So we know that it needs to be b. Look at a couple more of these. Which graph matches the equation? We've got plus 5. So I'm going to look at my asymptotes first. They all go through 5, those dashed lines. Now I'm going to look and see, is it above or below? That's positive, so it needs to be above it. That one's good. That one I can throw out. That one I can throw out. There we go. So it's A or D. Now I'm going to look and see, this is a 3, and 3 ends going away because that is bigger than 1. So I need one that ends going away from the dashed line. This one I end going towards it. This one I end going away. Must be this one. Let's do this one last one. Now the reason I'm stopping here, if you don't notice, I get to see the levels, and this one doesn't have different levels. So all these questions are about the same. They just go back and forth in the way they look. So last one that I'm going to do, and then if you need more help, you can go back through it or ask me during tutorial time. Which equation matches the graph? So I start with my asymptote is -1. These are all -1s. I see that it needs to be below it. So I'm looking for a negative sign, so it's one of these last two. And it is going towards the dashed line in the end. So I need it to be a fraction. Right? Towards it means fraction. So this is going to be my answer. The other two IXLs that you need to do are easier, or at least most people said it was easier when I've done it before. These are domain and range. So one rule is that the domain is always all real numbers. So if they ask me for the domain, that means it can go forever to the left and go forever to the right. And that is always true. And the range tells me the y value, so it can't go below this dashed line. So the lowest thing it can be is that dashed line. So y has to be greater than whatever the dashed line is. Now make sure you say greater than, not greater than or equal to, because it can't actually touch it. So we're looking at range. Dashed line is at 0. This is above that, so I need greater than 0. Domain is always all real numbers. Domain is always all real numbers. Now I'm to where it says domain and range. So I know domain needs to be all real numbers, and range is going to be less than, because it's below this time, whatever the dashed line is, so 0. So domain is all real numbers. Y is less than 0. And then we are moving our asymptote up and down. So domain's always all real numbers. The asymptote has to be bigger than the dashed line. Dashed line goes through 6. So it needs to be bigger than 6. The other one you're going to do is x dot 4, which is the same thing except it's a function instead of a graph. So we're not looking at a picture anymore. We are just looking at the asymptote. So we're looking for c. If there isn't a c, we know that that is 0. So it's positive, which means it's greater than the asymptote. Oh, sorry, that was domain. Domain is always all real numbers. Range is bigger than the asymptote. So this is positive, so it's bigger than, the asymptote is 0. Positive, so it's bigger than, the asymptote is -4. Domain is always all real numbers. Less than, because it's negative. The asymptote is 0, so I'm going to find less than 0 this time. Greater than, because it's big, so domain and range this time. Domain is all real numbers, right? And we know that it's going to be greater than because it's positive. 2 because that's the asymptote. And I think that y'all have got that one probably. So these are the couple things that you need to do. Just check right here. We're going to get each of these up to a 90. And then there is a short quiz, just let me see how you're doing, that you'll upload.